Silent Hill, the official novel. Written by Sadamu Yamashita. Translated by Emily, Lady Ducky, Fitch. Part 2. Darkness. Harry took Finney Street to the east and crossed the bridge into central Silent Hill, searching for a hospital at the mysterious woman's behest. According to his map, there is a building labeled Alchemilla Hospital on the southern end of town. His best bet at this point. Harry would need to travel down Crichton Street to reach it, but something else on the map caught his eye. He made a detour to the opposite corner of the intersection to the police station, hoping to scour the place for ammunition. With all the monsters still lurking in the streets, he wasn't going to make it very far with an empty gun. Just as Sybil had said, the station was as deserted as the rest of the town. No wonder no one was answering his calls. There are documents and investigation materials spread over the desks, as if everyone had simply vanished in the middle of a regular workday. Harry began to search each room. The firearm storage was locked tight, so he kept an eye out for any guns that might have been left sitting on someone's desk. Sure enough, he soon spotted a shoulder holster left on the counter next to abandoned paper cups full of coffee. Whoever this once belonged to must have taken it off on their break and vanished with the rest of the townspeople before they could return for it. Even as he felt a twinge of guilt at stealing something from someone who'd met such a fate, Harry was determined to put it to good use. Harry slid the gun from the holster to check it out. It looked to be a 10mm automatic, fully loaded, with 9 rounds. Pleased with his discovery, he returned the gun and took the holster, putting it on. Something caught his eye. A white slip of paper on the counter where the holster had just been. Coroner seals cold. Officer Gucci is unlikely to be murdered. He apparently died naturally. But medical records show Officer Gucci had no prior symptoms of heart disease. Harry grabbed a nearby jacket to protect himself from the cold. As he slid it over his shoulders, his eyes were drawn to a memo, scrawled on a chalkboard hanging from the wall. Product only available in select areas of Silent Hill. Raw material is White Claudia, a plant peculiar to the region. Manufactured here? Dealer equals manufacturer? White Claudia? The name rang a bell in Harry's mind. He'd written a couple books in the past on domestic drug trafficking, and he could remember some bits and pieces of information. It was a plant that grew on riverbanks and lake shores, notable for its long, oval-shaped leaves and pure white flowers. The seeds were known to have hallucinogenic properties, and were often sought after for use in ancient religious ceremonies. But now it was more common to refine the seeds into a recreational drug known as PTV. It was popular with the tourists in Silent Hill for a time, but police efforts soon shut down the local traffickers to help clean up the resort town's image. He never would have entertained the idea of visiting with Cheryl otherwise. But by the looks of it, it seemed PTV was on the rise again. A lump formed in the back of Harry's throat as his eyes scanned the words on the chalkboard over and over again. He couldn't shake the feeling that it had something to do with Cheryl's kidnapping. Every meager scrap of information he could find was a whisper, leading him a step closer to the truth. Damn that woman! Michael Kaufman's voice was shaking with rage. Curse after curse poured from his lips as he crammed items into his luggage. Who does that crazy old hag think she's fooling with her precious child of God bullshit? What a joke. You're just some gutter trash who got good at cheating and stealing. Just looking at the brazen face of yours makes me sick. You're nothing but a crook and a liar, and everyone in this god-forsaken town knows it. As he ranted, his office, once a meticulously decorated symbol of his pride, lay around him in ruin. His mahogany desk and shelves were marred by deep gashes. His precious antique book collection was scattered across the floor, the pages ripped and trampled upon. Even his expensive paintings had been deliberately torn. But this was only meant as a final insult. The real damage was clear when he found his hidden safe cleared out. Important documents and expensive securities were gone, and that liquid, his last resort, was nothing but a stain on the carpet. And this is the thanks I get for my years of cooperation? I swear I'm gonna make that sneaky old bitch pay. He had no doubt in his mind that this was the cult's doing. The safe's lock showed no sign of forced entry. Someone must have found the passcode somehow. He'd been keeping such a close eye on the cult's activities, and they'd still managed to slip by him. She thinks she can pull a fast one on me. Well, joke's on her. I never trusted that old bag for a second. Kaufman had transferred funds to a foreign account in anticipation of just such a betrayal. It was nothing compared to what he'd lost in the current turmoil, but it would be more than enough to get by. It was only a matter of time before the incident in Silent Hill came to light, and he'd much rather live a modest existence somewhere far away than rot in jail. Jail time might even be an optimistic sentence if his involvement in all this got out. Fleeing the country was his best bet at this point. Ugh, how did it come to this? He ground his teeth. What had come over him wasn't a change of heart, and he certainly wasn't being tormented by guilt after all he'd done. What he felt now was utter hatred. To have to deal with this after everything he'd done for the Order, after all the funds he'd contributed, and the space he let them occupy, and the medical treatment he offered. He could have never imagined the insanity that his actions would bring about. He had to stifle a laugh at the very idea that he would end up associating with those deranged cultists in the first place. Guess she's more than just a crook, she's a maniac who'd sell her own soul to the devil. He wouldn't be needing clothes, and there was no time for gathering unnecessary possessions, so he forewent a bulky travel bag in favor of sorting essentials in an unassuming attaché case. He packed 2 passports, one with his actual name, and a counterfeit bearing a pseudonym, a stash of gold and wadded bills taken from his safety deposit box, a 9mm handgun, and 2 boxes of ammunition, and an emergency set of medical supplies. Just as he was closing the case's lid and making sure he'd leave nothing behind, Kaufman heard a growl from behind him. He turned around to see a hideous monster of a dog shambling into the room. The creature groaned, saliva dripping from its eager teeth. For a moment, Kaufman could only stare in horror at the demon as it crept closer. In an instant, he reached for the attaché case behind him. Even from outside Alchemilla Hospital, Harry could hear the muffled gunshots. Someone, a normal human, was in there. Feeling equal parts hopeful and uneasy, Harry ran through the hospital's entrance and down the hall. Bang! Another shot rang out from somewhere behind the waiting room. He turned a corner to see the door to an examination room sitting wide open, and ran in, only to be greeted by a bullet whizzing past his head and embedding itself in the doorframe behind him. Wait, don't shoot. Harry held his own gun above his head and his free hand open, hopefully signifying that he didn't mean the stranger any harm. Thank God, another human being. The man across from Harry let his shoulders relax, bringing the gun to his side. He looked to be about 50 or so years old, with neatly slicked back hair and dressed in a fine suit, giving him an overall air of importance. It was then that Harry noticed the corpse of a dog oozing blood onto the floor. You got attacked too, huh? Are you hurt? No, I'm fine. My name's Harry Mason, Harry said, lowering his hand and offering it as a handshake instead. The man accepted, grasping Harry's hand with his rather cold, damp palm. Michael Kaufman. Do you work at this hospital? You could say that. Are you with the police? Oh no, I'm just a tourist. I just carry a gun to protect myself from those creatures, same as you. I see. Harry could tell by the look in his eyes that Kaufman wasn't entirely convinced. Actually, not long after I came to Silent Hill, my daughter went missing. She's only 7. Short, black hair. Have you seen her? I'm afraid not, Kaufman said, shaking his head. Listen, I don't know what's going on here. I was just taking a nap in the break room, and when I woke up, everything was like this. It's just, I was told I'd find some clue about my daughter here. And just who told you that? Well, I don't know her name, but it was a woman who was at the Balkan church. A woman wearing a veil? Yeah. Do you know her? No, I don't. I don't know any such woman. Suddenly, Kaufman became expressionless, an unreadable brick wall. At any rate, I'm terribly sorry about your daughter, Mr. Mason, but I'm afraid I can't be any help. I don't plan on staying in town any longer now that this place is overrun with those abominations. Not wasting another second, Kaufman snatched up a case from the desk behind him and slid past Harry and through the door. You be careful now. With those few words, Kaufman silently slipped away. What a strange man, Harry thought. Then again, the way Harry's line of questioning went, it probably started to feel less like a friendly conversation and more like a cross-examination. He had no evidence that the man had anything to do with Cheryl's kidnapping, but the encounter had left Harry with an unshakable sense of unease.